Well, as you can see on the screen behind me, we are starting a new series. It's titled The Cross, the Church, and the World. And we're going to be looking specifically about the next 6 weeks at 1 Corinthians, somewhere in the chapters of 1 and chapter 2. We're not going to go through the whole book of 1 Corinthians. But what we're going to be looking at is specifically the cross. And then on Palm Sunday, we're going to have a drama presentation in both services that's going to last about 7 minutes or so. And it's going to be talking about the cross. And so I thought this would be a nice precursor to some of that. And we'll see where it takes us with regards to Easter as well. But we're going to begin this morning by looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18 through 25. And this is what we read, I believe, penned for us even today. It says this. It says, the message of the cross is foolish to those who are headed for destruction. But we who are being saved know it is the very power of God. As the Scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. So where does this leave the philosophers, the scholars, and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look foolish, since God in His wisdom saw to it that the world would never know Him through human wisdom. He has used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. It is foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and it is foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. And so when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. Excuse me. But to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Now, I don't know if you noticed here or not, but there is kind of a pattern. Perhaps, maybe you noticed, there's a word that you'd be foolish not to have noticed that is repeated over and over again. You know what that word is? Can you tell me what that word is? Foolish. Yeah, you guys aren't foolish here this morning. In fact, it's interesting about this word foolish. Excuse me, as we get a full grasp of that, when we go back and we look at what Paul, the word that he chose to use in writing this particular text, Paul uses really a word from the Greek, and it's the word Moria, M-O-R-I-A, and in verse 25, it appears as an adjective, it's moros, M-O-R-O-S, and it's where we get the English word moron. Moron. So in other words, the word foolish, as we've read through this, is moron or moronic. So let me read that text again. You don't need to pull it up on the screen. It says, the message of the cross is moronic to those who are headed for destruction, but we who are being saved notice the very power of God. As the Scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. So where does this leave the philosophers, the scholars, and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look moronic. Since God in His wisdom saw to it that the world would never know Him through human wisdom, He has used our moronic preaching to save those who believe. It is moronic to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven. It is moronic to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. But to those who are called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. The moronic plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. And so foolishness means moronic. Now, the idea of moronic, or the idea of moron, is that it is ridiculous, it is stupid, it is ignorant, it is contemptible. In fact, the American Heritage Dictionary says that the word moron is considered to be offensive. So if I called you guys morons today, would you be offended? Depends on my tone, right? No, if somebody calls us moron, we have a tendency to be offended by that. But that's the exact word that Paul is using here, not just once, but 6 different times he says that it is moronic, it is foolish, it's utterly ridiculous. I hear that, and you know what I think about? I think about the political culture of today, right? Everybody's moronic, everyone's foolish. It's quite a way to get attention, isn't it? We see it played out in our own culture. That's what Paul was doing here as well. He was bringing attention And the first thing he says is those who are without Jesus Christ. Now, the term that he used was something different. He says those who are headed for destruction. But what he means is those who are without Jesus Christ consider the message of the cross as foolishness. They consider it to be moronic. They don't understand it. It makes no sense, absolutely no sense, that God would send His Son, that a Savior would need to die from them. So he says, those who are without Jesus Christ find it to be moronic. Then he says that God has turned the wisdom of the world into foolishness. He says it's moronic through the cross of Christ. He's turned the tables upside down, and he says to the intellectual people, he says, you guys aren't as smart as you think you are. That's the bottom line of what he's trying to say. The third thing that he says is this. He says that God will save anyone who believes in Jesus Christ, who believes in this moronic message, who believes in the foolishness of the preaching of the gospel. And so when this moronic message is preached, when this moronic or foolish message is proclaimed, the world kind of laughs at it. And God says, you can laugh all you want, but that is how I choose to save the world. The fourth thing that he says is, or describes, is that God's power is displayed through what men call weakness. And the foolishness of God turns out to be smarter than the wisdom of the world. Now, there's some of us who are sitting here today who have been raised in the church. Some of us maybe have seen a transition in the church go from piano and organ to more contemporary style of worship or whatever. But we've been raised in the church, and we kind of know what the motions are. When we go to Sunday school, we get the Sunday school answers. And let me just say up front, I hate Sunday school answers with a passion. I don't really care what you've heard before. I want to know what you're experiencing now. So don't give me the Sunday school answer stuff, okay? Just don't. But we've been raised in the church, some of us, for a long time, and we've gone through the motions. We put on our happy face when we get to the parking lot. We walk in like we've got our spiritual stuff together, like everything's absolutely fine. Our spiritual stuff doesn't stink, whatever you want to say. And we go through all of this process, and we sit here and we think, really, foolishness, moronic. I mean, who in the world would ever think that the cross or the message of Jesus Christ is foolish or moronic? Well, you know what? Maybe we need to get outside the four walls of the church every once in a while and see what the people really think. Because when they look at the church, they believe that the message of the cross is foolish, that it is moronic. And what's happened is, for us who are in the church, what we've done is we've lost sight of the reality of just how radical the message of God really is. The gospel message of Jesus Christ is radical. The gospel message of Jesus Christ is out of this world. The gospel message of Jesus Christ is contrary to the wisdom of the world. I think that's what Paul says in verse 21. He says the world will never know Him, meaning Jesus Christ. The world will never know Him through human wisdom. We all know people who are extremely intelligent, right? How many of you know someone who you would say is extremely intelligent? Just raise your hand. Okay, those hands, leave them up. How many of you would say that extremely intelligent person is sitting next to you? That's not nice, is it? Put your hand down. I'm just teasing, okay? The rest of you just suck it up, right? Oh, absolutely. Or getting brownie points out of this. The reality is there are intelligent people all around us. There's a lot of people with incredible intellectual powers. In fact, I will tell you that when I'm around some of those individuals, I just stand in awe. Why do I stand in awe? Because they have mastered a particular area of expertise. They know all the ins and the outs, and I just stand there, and I'm kind of amazed by that. And I've got to say this from a church perspective. I think it's kind of interesting that we have a tendency, and I see this a lot in the church, and I see this in the culture, but a lot in the church, where we have this mindset that we can handle on our own without talking to the experts. But no, listen. Let the experts, let's get their opinions and deal. We've been dealing with that this week with the projector. Our projector a couple of weeks ago, it died on us. And so we're in the process of trying to get a new one. And we have a company that's actually renting us one that you see being used on the screen behind me. But we're going through this process. And we all have our ideas until the experts come in. And when the expert comes in, we begin to understand a little bit. And I have to tell you, I stand in awe as I'm listening to this individual kind of lay out all of the different things that these projectors do and why they do it and how it's just amazing to me. There's people with incredible intellectual powers, and they leave us, or at least leave me in awe at times. The wisdom of the world is absolutely incredible. It can dream, it can design, it can build, it can create, it can produce. I mean, there's so many things that can be done. We are a generation of what I would call technological geniuses. Would you agree with that? And most of them are 5th grade and under, right? I look at my son. My son now is in college, but I can remember even when he was a little kid, he'd just look at me and say, "Dad, let me." Right? And that was back when it was just DVD players. I don't even think we use DVD players much anymore, do we? We have Chromecast and all this other stuff. You think about the technology. We can do things with our computers that my grandparents never even thought possible. It's amazing to me. We can split an atom. I'm not talking about ADAM, I'm talking about ATOM, an atom, okay? We can not only do that, but we can go down really into the deep recesses of the human body to discover what I would call a rogue cancer cell. And they can isolate that particular cell and provide treatment to that. We can listen to radio waves that come from the very edge of the universe. We can take an entire encyclopedia. Now, some of you are as old as I am, and you still remember when the encyclopedia salesman would come to your door. Does anybody remember that? Thank you. I feel much younger now, okay? For those of you who don't even know what an encyclopedia is, go to your public library and you'll realize that it's more than just one book, but it's a whole collection of books. And they're very thick, and that's where you used to go to get the information of what was taking place in the world. Now we have something called the internet, and we know everything on the internet is true, right? You see that out there? Now they can take that same encyclopedia and they can put it on a chip that is almost so small that it's hard to see or detect with a human eye. It's incredible. I sit at my desk and I can type an email message and I can hit the send button, and some of the first servers are like, "What's a computer?" Okay, but I can actually do that. I can hit the send button and that message is not only transported to the main office, okay, just outside my door. You say, "Well, why don't you just holler at John?" Because he doesn't listen and he got to get it in writing, that's why. But I can take that email message and I can send that email message to Nigeria, or I can send it to the backwoods or really the jungle of Irian Jaya, whatever it may be. And it's there in a matter of seconds. I mean, think about how incredible that is. And yet email is such a part of our life, just a part of our daily routine, that I think we've lost really the feeling or understanding of what a daily miracle it really is. Now we don't even need our computers, we have our phones. And just a side note, you remember when the first cell phone came out? Anybody remember that? It looked like a brick, a big old brick. Okay, we're showing our age this morning, okay? Teenagers are like, "Really? You guys were around like then? A microwave? You guys didn't." Yeah, we used not to have microwaves either, okay? But the cell phone used to be a brick, and then we always wanted to get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? But how come phones are getting bigger and bigger and bigger again? Just, those guys need to figure that one out. But that's a whole other side now. Just to say that the wisdom of the world is great. It really is. But understand that's only part of the story. Not only can we use our wisdom for good things, but it also can be used for evil, because those same emails that I talked about can be used by terrorists to send to each other to say, "Hey, we're ready to attack." I mean, if you remember 9/11 and what that was all about, since that time, I would say there's probably not much that would surprise us anymore. I mean, I was thinking about that this past week. What would qualify as unthinkable today? And there's not much. It seems like we've seen it all in action. So with that means that not only are we intellectual giants, but I would also say that we're moral pygmies. We don't have it all figured out yet. Because of that, we still struggle with this cross thing. It's said by Paul this way, that the world through its wisdom does not know God. He says it that way in 1 Corinthians 1:21, and he goes on and he says that he, meaning God, has used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. Wow. With all the wisdom and all the technology in the world around us, the God, the creator of the universe, who has literally created everything that is around us. That's pretty miraculous in case you lost sight of that. And yet he chooses to share the gospel message of Jesus Christ by using us. Those of us who have made a decision for him. Foolishness of our preaching. Absolutely remarkable. And so while the world cannot know God through its own wisdom, God decides to use the foolishness of our preaching to share the gospel message, to demonstrate the wisdom of his own plan. And so the bottom line for us is that God saves sinners through what the world considers moronic. Isn't that interesting? God saves sinners through what the world considers moronic. So the best thing that we can do is preach the gospel. Preach the cross of Christ. Amen. And when we preach the cross of Christ, people get saved. That's great, isn't it? I mean, we could stop right there, but we're not going to because it's too early. So we're not going to. And we don't want you to get to lunch too early because it would just blow the restaurants away. Boy, you guys are showing up early. So we're not going to. But it's ludicrous to think, though, that anyone could be saved through the gospel message of Jesus Christ. But it's also ludicrous for us to think that everyone is thrilled with the fact that we preach about the cross, that we preach about the gospel. That's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23. He says, so when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. Why were the Jews offended by the cross? Well, the Jews were offended by the cross because they're looking for the Messiah to come. This Messiah, though, wasn't just to come to save them from their sins. The Messiah, in their mindset, was to come. Why? To remove the oppression of the Roman Empire. They were trying to get away from the control of the Romans, and so therefore, if the Messiah comes and is all-powerful, he's going to put the Romans in their place. He's going to elevate us to our place of authority, and we're going to be victorious. And so, if the Messiah is Jesus Christ, then they could not even imagine that this Messiah is going to be crucified on the cross. Think about the cross. Let's be honest, we have really sanitized and domesticated the cross, haven't we? I mean, we take the cross and we gold plate it and we put it on a chain and hang it around our neck. Or some may wear it as earrings. Or we may have it in our stained glass, or we might have it in our sanctuaries, and a lot of times they're very ornate. We can have it hanging on the side of our building. Some might even have it on their steeples. And what we've done is we've sanitized, really, and domesticated the cross. You say, why does that matter? Well, it matters because in the first century, that would have been unthinkable. That we would even consider wearing a cross, or having the cross in our stained glass, or having the cross on our steeple, to having a cross in our buildings. It would have seemed unthinkable. In fact, the crucifixion was thought to be so offensive in the Jewish culture that that word, you would not even use the word crucifixion or cross in polite company. It was an offensive word. In our modern world, it would almost be as if we were to take and hang a picture of a gas chamber at Austerlitz and place it in front of our building here. Or if we were to take a noose and have it hanging from the front. Would that offend anyone, you think? Absolutely. That's how the Jewish people saw it. And so to them, to preach the cross, to preach the gospel of Christ, it just did not make sense. It was foolish. It was moronic. They could not conceive that God would send His Son to die that way. Now, the Greeks were another matter. They didn't practice crucifixion. The Greeks were more into the philosophical, the intellect. And so forth. They looked at the Jews and they thought, well, these are just stupid people who are killing people on a cross. What they wanted to do is find answers to life's deepest problems through education. And so the thought that you would save yourself not by intellect or not by education, but you would save yourself by a cross, that just seemed foolish and ludicrous as well. But it's not just then, it's today. I think some here might agree with me when I say that the cross today can be found to be offensive in our own culture. Would you agree with that? But why is it so offensive? Well, there's a couple of reasons I want to throw out here this morning. The first reason I think that we perceive it to be offensive is that it offends our pride. It offends our pride. The cross was to be a symbol, if you would, of weakness. In the eyes of many people, it was seen as a sign of weakness because it's a method for executing criminals. That's what it was for. It was for those who were the lowest of the low in society. It was for those who were enemies of the state, if you would. It was for those who no one wanted to associate or have anything to do with. That's who the cross was reserved for. And so what they would do is they would nail that individual to the cross, and they would just put on display that, and it was a display. You would go out and you would watch this execution take place. And then they would oftentimes leave that body there so people could go by and see this body as the birds were literally coming and pecking on the flesh and getting the eyeballs out and all that kind of grotesque stuff. And the message is very clear. Listen, if you don't do what we want you to do, that will be you. Loud and clear, right? We get it. That's who the cross was for. And so to see that we are to follow a man who died on the cross is ludicrous. It's foolish. It's moronic. And yet that is exactly what we are called to do. Not only as Christians, but that's what all of society is called to do, is to follow a man who died upon the cross. And for people in our culture, it's like, why in the world would I want to follow the loser? Why am I not going after the winner? And so it goes back and it offends our pride. The second thing that it offends is it offends our wisdom. It offends our pride. It offends our wisdom. Why? Well, the reason it offends our wisdom is that the cross spells an end to salvation by intellect. It spells an end to salvation by intellect. As if we could kind of gain God's measure by becoming smarter, okay? And yet if you look at the culture around us, that is exactly what is happening. You see, there's a culture in which we live that believes that sin is not the problem. Let me say it again. The culture in which we live believes that sin is not the problem. You know what they believe the problem to be? Ignorance. You look at the different things that are happening in our culture around us, and if we were just more tolerant, if we weren't so ignorant about this individual or this group of people and this group of people, then we could all just get along and we could sing kumbaya around the fireplace and we could all just have marshmallows and s'mores. Since we live in Hershey, we gotta have s'mores, right? And so we just, no. It's not about the fact that we can sit around and sing kumbaya. It's not just ignorance. The reality is the Bible says that all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us. Now, good education is necessary, and I think a good education is important. But I will tell you that a good education will never open the door of heaven. God purposely made the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ so simple that even young children could understand that. And let me tell you, if we were living in the Greek culture in Jesus' time, that would have seemed absolutely moronic. Because we're supposed to evolve. We're supposed to become more tolerant. We're supposed to... No. It's a simple message that tells us all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to take our sins. Where did He have His Son go? Upon the cross and shed His blood as the ultimate sacrifice for us. And so it offends our pride, it offends our wisdom, but also the cross offends our values. What does that mean? It means that it extends an equal invitation to the powerful, to the weak. It extends an equal invitation to the wealthy and to the poor. That's what the cross does. Understand that everyone, every single person is invited into God's family on exactly the same basis. And it's shocking to the world because that's not how the world does business. But let me just make it very clear. God really doesn't care how we do our business. God cares, at least how the world does their business. He does care about those of us who follow Jesus Christ. He wants us to do our business like He does His business. Those things that matter to us don't really matter so much to God. And so it's all of that to say that after 2,000 years, the cross is still as controversial today as it's always been. Would you agree with that? Now, let me just share with you that that's not changing. In fact, I believe it's going to be getting amped up even more. We see persecution of Christians all across the world, except really here in the United States. At least we might feel persecuted, but we aren't persecuted yet. But believe me, I believe it's coming. Because the cross of Jesus Christ points to a truth that people don't want to hear. Amen. And so Paul comes, and that's what he means in verse 25 when he speaks of the foolish, moronic plan of God. Let me read that again. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 25. He says this foolish, moronic plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans. Hey, humans, you put that, right? And God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strengths. And so God is wiser and God is stronger. Now, for those of us who are believers, we say, no, duh, right? But for those who are in the world, they're like, wait a minute, I thought I was God. We laugh, but that's reality. We have this mindset that we're becoming more and more like God. We just become wiser the smarter we get. We can create life. We can do all these things. We can become God. That kind of thing. Yet God's plan is wiser than the wisest of human plans. God's weakness is stronger. Get that. God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Christians who choose to worship God, who died on the cross, to the world, that's just foolishness. That is moronic. But again, if we dare to step beyond the stained glass windows of the church, we discover that not everyone's view of the cross of Christ is viewed with favor. The cross is viewed with shame, while the believer sees it as a symbol of salvation. But I'm going to throw out a controversial statement here today. And I want to explain it, but here's the statement. One could look at the cross and come to the conclusion that Jesus Christ is the great divider of humanity. One could look at the cross and come to the conclusion that Jesus Christ is the great divider of humanity. Wait. Kevin, Jesus is love. He is. Jesus is peace. He is. But look what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 10, verse 34. In fact, read this with me this morning. Let's read it together. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Wait a minute. Don't imagine I came to bring peace to the earth. Well, that can't be Jesus, can it? And yet it is. These are the words of Jesus Christ Himself. Jesus is saying this. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword. And what happens is these words shatter the popular notion that Jesus came to make us feel better about ourselves. We have this mindset that everything's just going to be hunky-dory. It's going to be wonderful. And the opposite really is closer to reality. That Jesus is the great divider of humanity. Jesus says those words. He says, don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. And then he goes on in verse 35 through 39. This is what he says. He says, I have come to set man against his father, daughter against her mother, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your own household. Who's saying this? What? Who? Jesus is. Whoa. Wow. He goes on. He says, if you love your father or mother more than you love me, you're not worthy of being mine. or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of being mine. I love my kids. I love my wife. You could mess with me, but you try to mess with them, and that's a whole different ballgame. I'll be on you, like they say, white on rice, okay? Jesus says that if I love my son or daughter more than him, then I'm not worthy of being his. Wow. He says if you refuse to take up your cross, do that again, if you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. Again, this is Jesus speaking, and yet when we look at those words on the surface, it's foolishness. Would you agree with that? I mean, the world's going to look at that and say, well, what about this Jesus of love? I thought Jesus was all about peace and harmony. It's foolishness. It's moronic to the world in which we live. It's something the church would even say, well, that doesn't make sense. That's not the Jesus I want to know. But as hard as those words sound, understand they come from the lips of Jesus Christ Himself, and we would do well to obey them and certainly not water them down. The cross judges the world. The cross judges every one of us individually, and it judges us by confronting us with our sin, calling us to repentance, and challenging us not just to forget our sins and ask forgiveness for our sins, but also challenges us to go and to pledge allegiance, a higher allegiance than we have ever to anything else in our life. God has to be first. Do you believe that?
Amen.
So how are you doing with it?
I'm good.
Thank you for your honesty. You're not alone, brother. But that's what He's calling us to. The way of the cross can be filled with pain. The way of the cross can be filled with difficulty. But when we're willing to go that route, what happens is it saves our life. But those who reject the way of the cross will end up losing their life and all that they've lived for. I will tell you also that those who choose not to do what He calls them to do, those individuals will hate Him all the more. It's just reality. But what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us? Well, there's a few things really quickly I want to go through this morning. The first thing I would say that we need to apply out of this is we must continue to preach the cross of Jesus Christ both boldly and aggressively. We must continue to preach the gospel of the message of the cross of Christ both boldly and aggressively. Let me say this very clearly. The cross of Jesus Christ is our only message. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Wow, that was enthusiastic.
Yes.
The cross of Jesus Christ is our only message. It is the good news that the world needs to hear. And so when we go from this place, we need to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. We need to preach the cross of Jesus Christ. And it's not just for me to do. Okay? We got that in our brain? So that means when you go to your office tomorrow, preach the cross of Christ. It means when you go to school tomorrow, preach the cross of Christ. It means when you go to your factory tomorrow, preach the cross of Christ. When you go to your neighborhood today, preach the cross of Christ. When you go to your own home, preach the cross of Christ. That's what we're called to do. If we believe in Jesus Christ at all, we must preach the cross of Christ. Why? Because He is the only way of salvation. He is the only way to heaven. Jesus said it, not me. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. Period. Didn't say, oh, by the way, you could also try this method. You can try this method. No, He didn't say that. The second application for us is not only should we preach the cross of Christ both boldly and aggressively, but we should not be surprised that as we preach the cross of Christ, the world is going to reject our message. Newsflash, right? This shouldn't discourage us. Because remember, we're still called to preach it boldly and aggressively. We know that the world is going to reject it. We get it. Don't be surprised by that. Don't allow it to discourage us. But understand that is reality for our life. If you're sitting here waiting for a merit badge for preaching the gospel of Christ, and you think the world's going to give you a merit badge that you can wear boldly, you're going to be waiting a long, long, long time. Like forever, right? Because the world is not going to give you a merit badge for preaching the gospel of Christ. They're going to reject it. The third thing that we can apply is this, is that we must reject any attempt to water down the gospel or to shy away from the message of the cross. My daddy used to say it this way, tell it like it is and let the chips fall where they may. That's what we need to do. We already know it's going to offend people. If you find that offensive, I'm sorry. But just because it offends someone doesn't mean it's the right thing or not the right thing. We need to make sure that we preach what's truth. And realize when we preach the truth, listen, with the egg hunt, when people come and experience the egg hunt, let me just say that ultimately we'd love to see people make a decision for Christ. But you know what the ultimate responsibility of ours is? Is to plant good seed. What God does with that, it's up to Him. But we can't plant good seed unless we're willing to preach the gospel of Christ. We can't plant good seed. And let me just say this, because I've been raised in the church, and I've been in the Church of the Brethren for a while now. Let me just say how offensive I find it when I hear people say, well, you know, we really don't need to preach the cross of Christ, or we don't need to preach the gospel. They'll know it by our love. Shut up. Okay? Okay, shut up. The reality is we've been called to preach the gospel message of Jesus Christ and show the love of Christ while we're doing it. There's the difference. Too often we use that as an excuse to say, you know what, we're just going to all gather together and they'll know us by they all know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Right? There's not a spoon big enough to make you gag. It's high time that we stop playing that game, because that's nothing but a lie from the devil himself. We are called to proclaim the gospel message of Jesus Christ with the words that we speak and with the life that we live. That's what we're called to do. So we need to reject any attempt to water down the gospel and shy away from the message of the cross. You see, Christianity is not reasonable, at least not in the way the world counts reasonableness. The message of the cross is not going to sound reasonable to the world. Christianity is revolutionary. Christianity is radical. That's why the world rejects it. It stands apart from all the world has to offer. I mean, think about the message of the cross. And if we look at it objectively, we will agree that it is radical, that it does not make sense, that God's ways are not our ways. His understandings are not our understandings. There are many paths in this life that we can travel upon, but there's only one path that leads to heaven, and that is Jesus Christ Himself. It's the cross of Jesus Christ, where Jesus Christ decided to die for you, and He decided to die for me. And so the world is going to look at the cross as being foolish. It's moronic. They're going to look at us as we are fools and moronic. Here's how I want to close today. I want you to raise your hand this morning. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, just raise your hand. And say, I'm a fool.
I'm a fool.
I am a fool.
I am a fool.
You put your hand down. Some of you really took that to heart, didn't you? But we are fools in the eyes of the world when we preach the cross. And so here's what we must do. Preach it anyway. Preach it anyway. That's what we're called to do. It's not just my job, folks. You have a mission field before you every day. There are people all around you who are not only watching the way that you live, but are listening for the message that you speak. Let's speak it boldly. Let's preach the cross of Christ. Let's pray.